So this tax bill, first step, making it through the House, I think the permanence in the bill from 2017 is going to give, everyone's talking about, oh, there's not enough certainty now. Well, what I can tell you is this permanence is going to give great certainty. And I think the scoring, you and I have talked about it quite a bit. It's Washington style scoring, and it's not real world scoring. What I am concerned about, or have been concerned about, are we controlling expenses? Yes. Are we going to grow the economy and accelerate the economy and stabilize and then bring down the total debt to GDP? And I think this bill does a great job of that.
As you told us more than once, one of your goals is a deficit that's no greater than 3% of GDP. The scoring, the predictions on this bill as it's written right now is 7%, maybe 6.5% next year, not anything close to 3%. Now, you said we won't get there right away, but when will we get there?
Well, David, what I've talked about is something with a 3 in front of it by 2028. We didn't get here overnight. We're not going to get there tomorrow. But what we've got to do is change the trajectory and start moving it down. So, could we get down to 6%, something below there with a 5 handle? Because what the scoring doesn't include, we have substantial tariff income coming in, so that's not included. We have DOGE savings in the hundreds of billions, that's not included. And then President Trump has made this very—
well, hold on. Why wouldn't you include the 10% baseline tariffs? Like, why wouldn't you include that on all products coming into the United States? That's a lot of revenue that's, kind of going to keep the government from overly spending. Like, I don't know, guys. It does, when it does come to that Congressional Budget Office, they did leave a lot of, I would say, elements out, or a lot of variables out when they got to their, I guess their final answer.
Very bold proposal on prescription drug pricing, which could save HHS substantial amounts of money. So none of those are included. So I'm very optimistic.
So let's include those for a moment here and start with the first one that you identified, which is tariffs. We've had some announcements even very recently about tariffs, maybe 50% from EU and 25% on Apple products. Is that motivation for that revenue? I mean, do you need those tariffs actually to go into effect to meet the numbers you need in deficit?
Not at all, because we have substantial revenue coming in now, and there is, at some point, there's an equilibrium rate, let's call it a Laffer curve, for tariffs. And I think we will reach that rate. The other thing that's happening is—
Hey, shout out to my man JTD. He says, "Keep it up, S.E.T. I appreciate the chat." Hey, man, appreciate you pulling up. Hey, first time supporter. Shout out to you, man. All right, guys, let's keep it going. And shout out to my man JTD.
A lot of their tariff barriers or non-tariff trade barriers. A lot of these non-tariff trade barriers are coming down, so friction's decreasing there. And again, because we don't know where these tariff negotiations are going to end up, they won't end up being scored, but it's several $100 million a year, several $100 billion a year of revenue that will be used. For every 100 billion, that's 100 billion less of bonds that Treasury has to issue.
When you talk about uncertainty and getting more certainty because of the tax bill, some of the uncertainty, a lot of it is because of tariffs right now, because we're not exactly sure where we're going to end up. Do you have a sense when—
He even put out the premise saying with every 100 million pretty much gained through these tariffs, I mean, it could also produce, growth in the bond market.
And the economic community, the business community will get better certainty on tariffs?
Well, we've done the 90-day pause. As I've mentioned several times, we have 18 important trading partners. So what everyone should really focus on are those. We've done a deal with the UK. My sense is over the next couple of weeks, we're going to have several large deals announced. We have put a pause and a 90-day pause with China. I expect that we will be negotiating in person with them again. And then the president today, when we initiated the pause and the 10% are moving down from the April 2nd rate to the 10% level was contingent on countries or trading blocs coming and negotiating in good faith. And I think the president was getting frustrated with the EU. You know, the problem with EU, I've said several times, they have a collective action problem. There are 27 countries. They all have different needs. The Germans, they are interested in cars, the French in agriculture. So, and then you have Brussels negotiating with them. Now, I am very impressed. I met my German counterpart, who's part of the new German government, the German finance minister in Banff, that he was very responsive. I think that the new chancellor, Merz, is going to give a opportunity for a U.S. Germany reset. So I'm very optimistic that perhaps Germany can help push the EU forward here.
Let's talk for a moment something.
Yeah, because Germany got more at stake. It's like, yo, Germany knows, like, yeah, we sell most of our cars and most of our steel gets sold into United States. So, yeah, my man, like, can you take them tariffs off? It's kind of what Germany's kind of hitting with it, because at 50%, they don't want their German engineering, their car companies, to hop on over here, take jobs away from them, and come over to America just to avoid those tariffs. Like, that is what a lot of these companies, well, not companies, but a lot of these countries are afraid of. The corporations that give their people jobs, yeah, they're afraid of those corporations leaving to keep their highest, I'll say their best buyer or their biggest market, which is the U.S. market. And yes, we are the biggest consumer market. That is why we can low-key break some of these countries with tariffs just by making our economy more enticing to build in, or making, yes, America more enticing to build in and bring their manufacturing to, or just overall jobs. It be call center, factory work, tech work, don't really matter. We control the cars. We kind of control the field with these tariffs.
You know terribly well, have lived it your professional life, which is the markets. The bond market hasn't necessarily stood up and applauded with what they've seen out of Congress. Is the bond market wrong?
Well, I think the notion that in any movements in the bond market are being driven by the action of Congress is what's wrong. First of all, this has been a global phenomenon. That the Japanese yields have moved substantially, German, UK. And David, if we go back and look, since either the beginning of the year or January 20th, when the Trump administration came in, the U.S. 10-year is the only yield that is lower today. So, all yields are up. And again, I think that was a coincident indicator. The market's very good at latching on to a story. So, I'm not particularly.
Honestly, people trying to dump our dollar, it was just a scare tactic. It was a scare tactic to see if they can get the president to fold by thinking that, everybody's going to dump America, when I'm like, bro, we're your biggest market. You guys will fail without us. So good luck doing that. But yeah, it was kind of a scare tactic to make us think they were going to dump their dollars while simultaneously keeping enough dollars to, do trade with. I know, right? You think they really were just going to dump our dollar? We still hold the world reserve currency for a reason. Like, we're still that guy. We are still that guy. Okay, guys, we're still good on that note. So it is pretty funny how these guys were trying to say, they're going to dump the American dollar. I'm like, that's a little tough, man. You kind of still need to trade. You still need the dollar to trade in a lot of situations, and not just oil.
Really worried about what the market's thinking, because, on the other hand, what the market also could be thinking is that this bill is going to create growth.
At the same time, you have things like the term premium up almost to 1% now, and you also have real yield up well over 2%. Should we be concerned with that? Is there a question here about the long-term ability to repay the debt?
Look, I think that, again, as growth accelerates, I'm not worried about the U.S. debt dynamics, because a change.
And there's only one reason why I trust this man when it comes to currency and our currency, our yields, and U.S. 10-year and all that good stuff. The reason why I trust this man is because, the past of Scott Bessent is a bit it's a bit shaky. I will be honest with you. This used to be like Soros's right-hand man. George Soros, the same guy who was betting against currencies, making billions of dollars on it. That's Soros, and this was his right-hand man. I mean, you could damn near say this man's a financial supervillain who's without working for the good. I know, right? But yeah, that's why I kind of trust this man. I'm taking him at least 80 to 90% when he talks about currencies, because he was working with one of the guys who made the biggest currency play in history, and that's Soros. And he was right there next to the man making these plays.
And the growth trajectory takes care of a lot of that.
Should we be concerned when we see yields going up on U.S. Treasuries and the dollar weakening? Normally, that's not the way it works, as I understand it. Is that something we should be concerned about?
Well, I'm not concerned about it, because I think part of it is we are seeing other countries step up. So I wouldn't, on many of them, I wouldn't necessarily categorize it as a weak dollar. It's for the first time in much of my career, Europe is actually going through a fiscal expansion. You know, back to this new German government, that they are opening the German purse for the first time, maybe even since the advent of the euro. They're taking off the debt brake. So the fundamentals are driving the euro. Japan is seeing a large increase in interest rates, driven by the Bank of Japan. So I think a lot of this is other countries strengthening, or other currencies strengthening, as opposed to the dollar weakening.
You have said you're concerned, certainly, about the deficit and getting it under control, and that President Trump, and you says that's really a priority for him, to get down to something with a 3 beginning it, at least, if not 3.0%. How high a priority is that? And let me push you on a little bit, like Mario Draghi. Will you do whatever it takes to get it to that level, so that if the present plan does not work the way you hope it will, you'll take other steps?
Well, I think what we've been trying to do, especially on the cost-cutting side, whether it's Doge, whether it's OMB, is go line by line. And on a lot of this, the Democrats are fighting us, the courts are fighting us. So let's see where that ends up. And of course, we can keep coming.
I mean, yeah, they fighting y'all. They don't want y'all to win for some reason. It's kind of crazy. It's like, we voted these guys in. So, if America fails, like, we all fail with it, like guys, liberals, Democrats. So it is crazy how you guys are like preying on the downfall of the United States, which we won't lose. We won't, even if you guys won it. But it's just funny that y'all preying on it.
Back in terms of making government more efficient. I think I've been there 3.5 months now, and I can tell you the amount of waste, fraud, and abuse is startling.
Yeah, I think most of us who have dealt with Washington would not disagree with that at all. The question is, where do you trim and how do you go about it? There was a $2 trillion number thrown out at a rally here in New York City, as I recall, by Elon Musk and Howard Lutnick. Was that a wrong number? Are you going to come close to $2 trillion out of costs?
Well, we'll see over what the scoring window is. Could we end up with 150 billion a year in savings, over the CBO window? That'd be $1.5 trillion. So,
but you're on track, you think, on the cost cutting side?
Well, again, there's a lot of resistance that the Doge and Elon were criticized for the pace they did, but I tell you, just in my 3.5 months in Washington, if you don't move fast, then the swamp kind of grabs you and you start sinking, and the vested interests kick in.
What other tools do you have in your toolbox to apply to the deficit if the present plan doesn't deliver all that you hope?
Oh, look, I think it's why don't we wait and see how this works out? Because I think we can see, as I mentioned, it's a 3-legged stool. So I think it would be the third part: trade, tax, and deregulation. So deregulation is the slowest moving part. I would expect that to substantially kick in to the economic growth in the third, fourth quarters and really accelerate next year. Also, one of the most powerful economic parts of the tax bill is the immediate expensing of capital goods, 100% for capital goods. And what we have added to that is 100% expensing of factory structures. So I think that that could really accelerate the growth.
And as you look at this problem right now, what is your approach to making sure that we bring the U.S. economic machine into line, and particularly the business community and investment, most importantly?
Well, let's talk about two pieces. But so before I was with you just now, I was with a group of community bankers. So we are doing a substantial amount.
Okay, that's what it is. Okay, so pretty much we're pretty much giving an incentive for pretty much these guys to build over here, and we're going to go ahead and give them 100% financing on capital goods and factory structure, which means we'll help finance or pretty much finance their factories to get these jobs going a whole lot faster. And then with the cutback on regulations, that means operations should be starting a whole lot quicker.
Of financial deregulation to make sure that the benefits are more evenly distributed across the U.S. economy. That, as I said before, Wall Street's done great. Now it's time for Main Street to do well also, and they can both do great together. It's not an either or. So when I was with these community bankers, they were talking about the substantial amount of regulation that's been crushing them over the past 10, 15 years, and a huge amount of small business loans, huge amount of real estate loans, ag loans are made by these community banks. So we are really focusing on that. On U.S. business, we want to make the U.S. the most attractive location for capital. You and I were talking, I was just with the president in the Middle East. We were in Saudi, we're in Qatar, and we're in the UAE. And the trillions of dollars that are going to be pushed into the U.S.
One form of regulation that gets a lot of attention in New York and on Wall Street is banking regulation. Let's talk about the supplemental leverage ratio, which seems like an obscure thing off to the side, but
all right. So yeah, deregulation effects should kick in Q3, which would be in around like that fall time. Q4, would be around that winter time, of course. So pretty much you're saying going into the new year, starting Q1 of 2026. I mean, the regulation should pretty much be in full effect, and we should see all the good that it's doing. Oh, well, cutting back on regulations.
It has been the subject of much discussion, and it does, as I understand it, relate to U.S. Treasuries.
Only if California would follow suit.
And yields on U.S. Treasuries, so that if major banks held more U.S. Treasuries, it would bring yields down. You've said you're going to take more of an active role, as I understand it, with respect to some of that banking regulation. Where are we with that?
I think we are very close to moving the supplementary leverage ratio, SLR. That is moving along very quickly between the three banking regulators, the Fed, the OCC, and the FDIC. So I would think we could see something on that over the summer.
And knowing the markets as you do, would you anticipate that might have a significant material effect on Treasury yields?
Well, I think it could, because...
All right, and the SLR is the supplementary leverage ratio. So yes, SLR is a non-risk weight capital requirement imposed on large banks by the Federal Reserve. All right, all right, cool.
Banks are being penalized for holding treasuries. There's a large...
and pretty much it ensures banks maintain a specific level of tier 1 capital relative to their total leverage exposed, including on and off balance sheet items. Oh, okay.
Supplementary leverage charge. So I think for holding the risk-free asset, we can reduce that. And, I've seen estimates that it could bring yields down by tens of basis points. Certainly during the COVID crisis, it was temporarily taken off, and it had a big effect.
Let me ask something different.
Here's the thing, though. If the SLR pretty much was, I wonder how long this has been around, because if you read the purpose, it's like, it aims to prevent excessive leverage and ensure banks have sufficient capital to absorb losses, even in times of stress. And I wonder how long this SLR was around, because I'm going like, yo, then what the fuck was 2020? I mean, what the hell was 08? What the fuck was that? Like, y'all, where was y'all at?
Different, but I think might be related, which is stablecoin. If really we went big into stablecoin in this country, what effect could that have on the strength of the dollar? Because people might have to hold dollars in order to match against it, or even for treasuries.
Well, we are going big on digital assets. So Trump administration has made.
And it makes sense now. All right, so yes, the SLR, which pretty much prevents the banks from doing what they did in '08. Yeah, I know, over leveraging, pretty much giving out all the loans in the world with no way to pay them back. But yes, so this pretty much prevented. This was brought up in 2014. So yes, the supplement leverage ratio was introduced by the Federal Reserve in 2014. As pretty much saying, yeah, guys, yeah, banks, yeah, never again will we let you guys do what you guys did in '08.
Digital assets are priority. Past administration starved and almost made extinct a lot
Shout out to my man Fox Chase for the dollar, man. Appreciate the support, brother.
of these companies and pushed it offshore. So what we want to do is apply the highest U.S. regulatory and AML standards to digital assets, especially stable coins. And I've seen estimates that just over the short term, stable coins could create $2 trillion of demand for U.S. Treasuries and Treasury bills. To put that in context, the number is probably about 300 billion right now.
There are reports, including on Bloomberg, that there may be, if I can call it, privatization of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, something that's been talked about since I think they were nationalized, essentially, during the great financial crisis. I heard the president say, I'm going to ask Scott Bessent about this. So has he asked you, and where does that stand?
It is a goal for this administration. Again, we're doing peace deals, tax deals, trade deals. So as we land some of those deals, then we will focus on that. But David, what I can tell you, we are doing a great deal of studying at Treasury, because the one requirement for this privatization is that they are privatized in such a way that mortgage spreads do not widen. And in fact, is there a way that we can make the spread between the risk-free rate and mortgages tighten as the Fannie and Freddie are privatized?
That was exactly my question. So do you know the answer to the question? Is there a way to do that? Because most people are concerned that will drive up mortgage rates.
Sure, there are several ways to do it, and we're exploring it. So we will move forward again after we land some of the peace deals, trade deals, and tax deals. Then we will work on this privatization deal.
One of your many responsibilities has to do with taxation and the IRS. I know that you are really pushing hard for monetization of the IRS. At the same time, we've lost a lot of people at the IRS. Isn't that hurting their ability to do their job?
So, David, my three priorities: collections, privacy, and customer service. And if we look over a long view, we haven't lost a lot of people at the IRS. There was a massive headcount increase from the Inflation Reduction Act and back to this crazy CBO scoring by increasing expense.
Pretty much Biden, he made up for his loss in factory jobs, or AKA middle-class jobs. He made up for the loss in that by creating a whole bunch of government jobs that didn't really need to be around.
There was the scoring that you would actually somehow up collections, which didn't happen. So we had a great collections year this year. Came in above target, and this modernization program, the tech modernization program at the IRS, was begun in 1990. The young man who was in charge of it who I put in charge of it was not even born then. So that it's 15 billion over budget. It's $3.5 billion a year budget. I think it's running on COBOL, which is what I may have learned in college, on 12 different systems. So we are going to fix that. And I think all three of my priorities are going to be served. And I think it could be substantial savings to the American people, because the IRS roughly processes as many transactions as a mid-sized U.S. bank, which does it at 10% of the number of people, 10% of the cost.
President Trump said a while ago, posted actually on social media, that they were in the process of removing the tax exempt status from Harvard. There's been a lot of issues with Harvard, but that's one that comes within your bailiwick. Where is that process right now?
The president is moving forward with that. And we're also looking at taxes on endowments. And I think the important thing here, and it goes a little bit back to this Main Street versus the elites, that Harvard, to have a tax exempt status, there are rules you have to follow. And if you're
which is wild, by the way, that Harvard has a tax exempt status from, I mean, let's be real, from gaining foreign influence, from having a foreign influence. Like I said, most of Harvard's dollars, which is about 56 billion, comes from endowments. Now, it be onshore or offshore endowments. I mean, the argument is, I mean, the percentage is yet to be, mathed out. But we do know for a fact that where a good amount of it's coming from. So to honestly sit here and give Harvard that tax-free exemption, and they're taking advantage by taking large lump sums of money from adversarial nations or nations that just don't share our philosophies or our way of life. Yeah, I mean, we should charge them for that. Well, or pretty much charge these outside entities that want to interfere in our education system by indoctrinating our young students. It is sick, but I mean, this is what they're doing. Like I said, we got people like Qatar, or individuals like Soros.
They're not following the rules. No one's above the law. So we will see if they're following the rules. It looks like there's a substantial number where perhaps they weren't. And, again, too, Harvard is a gigantic hedge fund. They run a leveraged investment model. So we'll see where all that goes.
Is it Harvard alone, or are there other universities or colleges that also might be subject to review on tax exempt status?
I haven't seen that, but again, back to cutting government expenses. These things are more out of control. The universities, they are more out of control than the government. That there is a separate inflation index. It's called like the Index of Higher Education Inflation Index, and most of the expenses have grown at CPI plus 3%. So, they need to get their houses in order.
Let's come back to Banff, because you just got back from the G7 meetings. And the communique, as I read it, really focused on imbalances. What were the imbalances you're most concerned about?
Well, I think the group as a whole was very concerned about the global imbalances around China, that China just keeps increasing their share of global manufacturing and has not done a much needed adjustment in terms of consumption. And as I predicted, I normally don't like to take victory laps, but I did predict it, and I was right. I said when the U.S. put up the tariff wall, that all those Chinese goods would go somewhere. And I think the G6 has seen that these Chinese goods are starting to permeate into their economies. They're quite worried about it.
Yeah, and it's not working out because China does not have the consumer consumption power, or I guess their consumer consumption rate is like 38%. So yeah, their consumers cannot buy or take the load of their products or the supply of it. Like I said, we're talking about a country who makes all of its money off selling and never really buying. The only time they buy is, well, to make more products to sell. And that's not really working out for them. And what Scott Bessent's talking about, his victory lap was, well, he pretty much called it. He pretty much called that, yeah, China's going to break. And that's exactly what happened in China. Actually, I don't even think Scott Bessent knows how right he was about China, because China has broken to a point where I don't even think they can save themselves at this point. It might be over for the CCP. It just might be over. And then we might be going through some economic troubles due to the video that's going to come up next. We always got to keep it a buck here with you at S.E.T Media. So get ready for some harsh truths.
And
no, it is not about how China wins the day. It's really about how, well, if China fails, then, well, it's gonna hit everybody.
but there's a whole series of global imbalances. We have a large trade deficit with the EU, so we'd like to see more pro-growth consumer spending there. And but the real thing, when I think about China and the rest of the world, especially the U.S. In the U.S., we are trying to rebalance toward more manufacturing, mostly high-end manufacturing, not the kind China has. Everyone agrees that China needs to rebalance toward less manufacturing, more consumption. And is there a chance that we could do it together? What Ray Dalio might call a big, beautiful rebalancing.
So as I understand, I'm not a macroeconomist, as you know, but so as I understand it, when you have these trade imbalances, it means we're importing, buying more things, and we're exporting dollars, essentially, overseas. A lot of those dollars have been coming back to us in various forms, particularly in U.S. treasuries. Can you have a rebalancing, for example, with China, or with Europe for that matter, that doesn't necessarily raise the yield on treasuries because there are less dollars overseas to be invested in U.S. treasuries?
Oh, sure. I mean, these balances weren't always like this. In 2000, before the China shock, we've historically had big inflows into treasuries. But what used to happen was in the old days, trade would come in and then we would sell the other country a GM. Now we are selling them either a treasury bond, private equity, or Google stock. And that has a lot of distributional problems within the US. So that's how we've ended up with the coast or Wall Street doing very well, middle of the country, manufacturing being gutted. So, I think it's the composition.
And it is always wild how it's Wall Street that's pretty much telling us to walk back the tariffs, but the middle class is like, no, keep it up, because it was Wall Street who benefited from the gutting of the middle class. So when I always say, or what I've been saying lately, is that the Democrats is now holding water for the corporate elites. That's literally what they're doing now. For the guys on Wall Street, for the big bankers, yeah. And here's the thing, you Dems, y'all got the wrong enemy here, right? Now, I want to let you guys know that Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, like, these are not the corporate elites, or these are not the elites that you will mistake them to be. And you guys are going after the wrong people. Like, here's the thing, and your argument against trickle-down economics, these people want to make sure that that system works. It works for them. It what keeps their business moving. Now, this is how you find out who the real enemy is. What is the one industry where holding money still makes you money? There's only one industry, and I'm pretty sure you guys know it. I ain't going to make you spend too long trying to figure it out. It is banking. Yes, banking is the one industry that you put your money in, and they make money from holding your money still, and they make a lot of money off how much money they're able to hold in place. So yes, it's the big bankers that you guys are actually upset about. It's the big bankers that you guys talk about when you're saying that, oh, all they do is hoard their profits and hold their money up. I'm like, well, there's only one industry that actually makes money like that or doing that. So you guys honestly have the wrong enemy in sight, and you're missing out on the real ones. I mean, the real enemy is out there on CNN crying, the CEO of Chase, and you guys are pretty much holding his water. It's absolutely crazy.
Of the flows coming back in. And then, as you mentioned, I think we can see more bond buying by U.S. citizens, U.S. institutions. But the other thing that I will say is, I have access to the data, and we've actually been seeing foreign national entities, whether it's reserve managers, sovereign wealth funds, or pension funds, have been buying more treasuries in the latest auctions.
So when we talk about trade, we talk about goods, sometimes services. What about capital flows and how capital flows work? There seems to be a movement in parts of the world toward stopping capital flows. I mean, we've had Macron in France say Europe can make it on its own. We've had Australia take certain actions requiring pension plans to invest domestically. Are we moving toward autocracy?
I don't think we have to. There's certainly nothing the U.S. is doing to prevent capital flows. We except for strategic, products, high value tech products. The rest, we want smooth capital flows globally. Could we see more people being more nationalistic? Maybe, but again, as we saw with these trillions of dollars from these Middle East countries coming into the U.S., the U.S. is the premier destination for capital. We are working to do everything we can on that. And David, back to your question on the money coming back into the bond market, that a lot of it's going to come back in the form of foreign direct investment, which is actually a much more stable kind of investing.
Let's talk about the dollar for a second and where the dollar is. I've seen some charts actually about the nominal value of the dollar versus purchasing power parity. And in fact, that there's been a growing difference between those, where the nominal value is well above PPP. I mean, almost at historical levels. From your experience with markets, does that have to correct itself? Does that mean the dollar's overvalued?
It doesn't have to mean it's overvalued, and lots of times that levels can stay versus PPP, which is just an academic measure. Many currencies stay above their PPP equilibrium for a long period. And David, I can tell you that when I look at the amount of innovation going on in the U.S. vis-a-vis the rest of the world, everybody wants to come here.
So as you look forward, what is the thing that worries you the most?
That we are.
All right, now that whole PPP went over your head. We're talking about in economics, PPP stands for purchasing power parity. Well, yes, parity. Parity is a theory that suggests the exchange rate between two currencies should equal the ratio of their respective price levels of basket goods and services. So pretty much, essentially, the PPP aims to equalize the purchasing power of different currencies by eliminating price differences across countries.
Not able to, that somehow our agenda gets slowed down. That whether it's the courts, whether it's the Democrats. That's really what worries me the most.
And on deregulation, how long will it take till we actually see it in productivity?
Well, I think we're going to see it in the economic numbers in the third and fourth quarter.
In the third and fourth quarter of this year.
Yep.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, because again, that when you ask me what worries me is this. Look, we need this substantial permitting reform, that we aren't able to build things, that we have, because of this AI boom, we're becoming the AI superpower. Well, that's going to take a lot of electricity. Yeah. So you're going to need energy pipelines. You're going to need,
which Donald Trump just signed executive orders to unleash nuclear energy. So shout out nuclear energy. That's going to handle most of the AI electrical needs.
Transmission, and the fact that we have that it takes 3, 6, 7 years for the permitting. So what worries me is that somehow we get bogged down in a legal morass, because this administration is really trying to get America back to building again.
One of the things that people are interested in is the sovereign wealth fund. I remember, actually, as I recall, seeing President Trump sign an executive order with you in the Oval Office.
Yes.
And talking about it at the time. Where does that stand right now? Because some people say, if you're really going to try to build the wealth of the United States, you're better off cutting the deficit than borrowing money to put it in a sovereign wealth fund.
Yeah, I think the president decided that it's on pause while we work on everything else that we're doing now. So, and he said the other day that we'll probably spend more time paying down debt. He is laser focused on paying down debt.
And you're prepared, if it doesn't go the way you want it to do other adjustments to make sure we are paying down the debt? Because some people are a little skeptical.
Well, again, David, let's talk about can you grow the denominator faster than the numerator. Like the reason we got here.
I mean, let's be honest, yeah, because we kept going under liberal rule. I ain't gonna lie to you guys. There was gonna be a time where there was gonna be no ifs, ands, or buts to the cuts in Medicaid or Medicare. Actually, there wouldn't be cuts made to help out with it or help the efficiency. It would just have to be a cut in general. There'd be winners and losers because we wouldn't have been able to pay our bills, wouldn't have been able to pay the debt. Because the way the Dems were going, they were going to hollow out the middle class. They were going to raise taxes, get all the jobs to leave. They weren't going to put tariffs up, so these guys were still going to be able to sell into this economy until eventually we just imploded on ourselves.
Was
I know, dark future though, but that's if Kamala would have won, and then we'd have had a Democratic rule for maybe like 2 more presidencies. That'd have been a dark future we'd have been in.
Think about taking out a home mortgage. It's fine. If the value of your house is stable or growing faster than the debt. What's happened is that previous administrations took out a big mortgage. We didn't grow our way out of it. Now, I actually think that there is a chance that we can constrain the spending, up the growth, and that changes the trajectory. Because going back to this CBO scoring, which is alien to anything that makes sense, that if you cut taxes, they still score growth at 1.7, 1.8%. If we raise taxes, and if this tax bill didn't go through, it would be the biggest tax hike in history, then growth stays at 1.8%. So, I think that we can accelerate growth here. So, my worry would be that somehow there is a glitch and the tax bill did not get passed soon enough. So, I would encourage our colleagues in the Senate to push for the July date that Leader Thune has.
Last question. Growth is critical to your approach and the president's approach. What growth are we talking about? What are you projecting and when? Because right now we're not close to 3% growth.
Look, I think we can get to 3% pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, okay. How quickly is pretty quickly? Months, quarters, years?
Quarters.
In quarters, we'll be at 3%, you believe?
Yes.
Sustainable.
Yeah. Look, I think we were in the middle of, as I talk to industry, this U.S. innovation edge, we are starting to see real productivity increases like no other country is. I think with the deregulation, with the certainty from taxes, and with this full expensing, which from 2018, 2019, going into COVID, for the industrial economy really gave it big impetus. So, I'm expecting that by...
I will give him this. One part of the plan so far, and like I said, everything he's saying is, in future tense, but there is one part of the plan that is working quite well. 1, the reduction in inflation. And 2, job growth. We've had a positive job growth within 100,000 or more in job growth during the past, 4 months. So, yeah, when he's talking about growth, I mean, if you want to talk about growth, we do have growth in jobs and a reduction in inflation. So we're going in a good direction so far. So far, the plan is working. Now, if we just get the tax cuts all the way through, get the regulation cuts all the way through, then we'll be in good shape.
Certainly by this time next year, we will be north of 3, and that we will be turning the corner toward the end of the year.
All right. Now let's get to the next video here, because I did say I was gonna work this one video out with you, break